Hello and welcome to Fintech Diary. Every week we speak to an industry expert who's part of the fintech revolution. In the world of fintechs, which is based on constant evolution and innovation, we question change makers on how they plan ahead and read the future developments. So, in every chapter of the Fintech Diary, we get the breadth and depth of every segment related to fintech. My name is Amol Deche, and my guest for this chapter is Deeksha Kaushal, the Director of Banking and Financial Services Partnerships for Google Pay India. Diksha, glad to have you.
Thank you for having me here.
So, Diksha, before we begin, let me get some basic perspective or the basic understanding of Google Pay. I think half the India is today using Google Pay. Most of the people, those who are digital literate, are either using Paytm, Google Pay, or Phone Pay, or maybe one or two more apps. But you are there in the top list for sure. And I'm sure most of the people have Google Pay already there in the phone. But I would like you to give us some data points in terms of, how many customer, what is your customer base right now? How many transactions are happening on Google Pay on a daily basis? How many employees or typical workforce working specifically for Google Pay? And if you could share those details with us, it would be really easy for us to understand the breadth and depth of Google Pay in India.
Mole, as someone who was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I distinctly remember having to take the Delhi Transport Corporation bus to college and getting some pocket money to pay the amount. Sometimes I used to take an auto rickshaw, and again, I used to ask for that pocket money. When I travel today, to see that GPay QR in an auto rickshaw, or someone asking that GPay hai kya, makes us feel so good. It's been a matter of privilege and honor to be part of the digital payments journey in India, and being part of what NPCI and the entire ecosystem is built here. When we look at what we're doing from a business perspective today, we're essentially focused on serving consumers. So we have, somewhere close to 2 billion transactions that happen on our consumer app on a monthly basis. And we're looking to serve our merchants, about 10 million plus merchants that we have who use QR codes. And when we look at terms of the diversity of, the consumers and merchants we serve, almost two-thirds of our transactions happen beyond the top cities. In fact, they happen across almost 300,000 villages and towns and cities. And from a business perspective, we're very committed in terms of how do we continue to serve our consumers and merchants in a way that we can offer them privacy first, secure, and reliable payment experiences.
Okay, noted your points, Diksha. Meaningful data points that you shared, and I really echo with your example of the bus, the travel, because today everybody is paying even like small rupees one to rupees 10 transactions on the Google Pay or the Paytm or other the payment applications, and that's kind of transformation that India has made specifically on the UPI. So amazing thoughts there, Diksha. Uh, my question to you now is a very important one, and I'm sure the whole fintech world would like to know this because whenever we speak to fintech companies operating in payment space specifically, they talk about the billions of transactions which is happening on the platform or the kind of volume which they're generating. But the immediate question that I have right now is how do you translate these numbers into the business in terms of revenue or profit? So when you say you have maybe 10 million transactions, sorry, 10 million merchants, 22 billion transactions, something like this, and huge data points. Does it really add to your profit? Do you make some money out of it?
So, the way we're focused in terms of our businesses, we have a consumer app where we enable UPI payments and we have some tokenized cards. And that's where we do these 2 billion transactions per month, predominantly on UPI. And then we have the merchant app where we have about 10 million merchants live. And when our consumers are transacting on the app, there are several use cases. So, for example, there are use cases such as spending for food or for fashion or for travel, could be for utility payments. And some of those categories, such as utility payments, has a small commercial fee which is associated with it. Similarly, we have, on the consumer app, some offers that go to our consumers, such as, credit card that we work on with Axis Bank. On the merchant side, as we enable payment experiences for our merchants, we have various gateways and tools to help merchants build a simple digital online presence. So, for example, we have a spot platform, again, which has some amount of commercial fee attached. And as we look at this entire ecosystem evolve, it's been a remarkable journey, the way digital payments in India have grown in the last 5 years. But when you look at the broader numbers, about 200 million is where people estimate that Indians are using digital payments. So out of our vast population, there is a very long set of population and Indians who we can collectively look at in terms of how do we take digital payments to that cohort as well. So that's something which as the ecosystem we all get ready to build on. Um, Continuing on that journey in terms of building the infrastructure and the investments for that, we're hoping that as we go down those paths, there will be more sustainable models that will be coming up.
Okay, noted your points, Diksha. Tell me something about the partnerships models. You're also heading kind of a partnership vertical. So, what kind of partnerships Google Pay has specifically with financial institutions, merchants? You elaborated it partly in the previous answer, but if you could describe it more for the benefit of the viewers, would be really great.
Thank you for the question, Amol. There is this saying that goes that if you want to walk longer or further, you walk together. And I think, the way we think of this entire journey, for us, from day one that we came into, India, and we launched as Tez back in 2017, which subsequently we renamed to Google Pay. We have been very focused on our entire model to be as partnerships with banking and financial service providers, and being someone who's complementary to the various services that these esteemed institutions provide. So essentially, our model is that we have, as a technology company, a platform where we have various sorts of consumers, merchants, and we work with banks and financial services organizations to see how can we provide to them a digital access. So, for example, on the credit card and with Access, where Access has a credit card which gets offered to consumers on our platform.
Noted your points, Diksha, but there are a lot of things happening in the payment space. A lot has been covered. Many people are using UPI, most of the fintechs, and they have built a nice payment gateway. And we can see that people are also getting familiar with the payments space specifically with the innovation that is happening in this area. But again, a lot of fintechs are not making money. They are also trying to explore different ways, and the competition is still very high. So, what next specifically for the payment companies like you going ahead? Maybe if I give you a timeline of 2 to 3 years, because ultimately, all the companies, the fintech companies or the companies like you also operating in payment space, will have to make some money for yourself. And I do understand the market is huge. There are a lot of people still wants to come on the payment platform, and those dynamics are there. But what next specifically for payment companies in terms of the business going ahead, Diksha?
So, uh, again, I'll start with a saying, which is that often when we want to think about the future, right, it's helpful to take some lessons from history. And when we look at terms of how NPCI enabled this entire ecosystem and how various participants, including banks, technology companies, fintech startups, came together, there are a few things which stand out, which we believe will also, be very important in terms of how the future plays out. So the first one there would be that when we look at interoperability that this ecosystem has enabled. So the fact that with UPI, the promise of JAM, which is Jandhan accounts and Aadhaar and mobile, was not dependent on the type of bank or the type of phone or the type of account that you had. It was universal, it was across. That interoperability that UPI enabled is something which brought the best of most of the participants. So, for example, there were banks who had the accounts. There were third-party application providers who were able to provide a lot of applications, tech interface, consumers, and there were players who had merchants who were starting to adopt this. And with these forces coming together and converging is where UPI is today, and it's a legendary story. We think that this is likely to play out further in the future as well, which is to say that partnership models, complementary play sets, thinking of the story on payments in India as beyond a zero sum game, because we have a long runway still, is something that we feel will continue to happen in the payment space. Which brings me to the second point, and I discussed this briefly earlier, which is on
Right.
partnership.
Mhm.
We truly believe that, again, as payment space evolves and as fintechs look to grow, partnership models would be very important, because when we look in terms of the services that need to get provided here on, which could be beyond the top internet convergent cities and towns, could be
Right.
getting deeper into penetration, building much larger architecture. How do we have partnership models evolving?
Mhm.
The third one that I would say is that if you look in terms of what's happening on credit in the country, that could be another area where, if you look at credit cards as of 2021, it was some single digit penetration in numbers, and that is one of the largest volume credit products in the country. So, how that ecosystem evolves for fintechs overall, how can we think of that as a space where we're able to provide to consumers a reliable, safe way of interacting with credit? There are few areas where you still have money lenders and risk debt traps, etc. So, what is a sustainable model of building that? That would also be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Okay, so before I come to that credit part, Diksha, I would like you to tell us more specifically about not the making payment, but if the payment fails, what happens later on? Maybe, and you can take a minute or two and explain us, because as a customer, forget I am a journalist or an editor, but as a customer, it's very difficult for people to understand by any chance if the payment is not gone, but or not received by the next party, then where is the money? Because sometimes the reconciliation settlement takes so much time that the customer doesn't get the money. So what actually goes wrong? That is one part of the story that I wanted to explain. And sometimes, also when you make a lot of subscription payments, obviously RBI has some rules over there. A lot of times the payment fails there and the customer doesn't know where the money goes. So if you could give us some highlights about what actually goes wrong here.
So, first of all, when you look in terms of payment, and I'm sure all of us would have had an experience where when we've made that payment, it goes immediately, and you feel so happy that it's the experience is instant and you're done. But equally, sometimes there are experiences where the payment doesn't go through. Essentially, the way the entire UPI ecosystem is made, which is also the power of the ecosystem, is that there is a third party application provider, such as Google Pay, where the transaction starts. And then it goes to the banking ecosystem where the payment service providers are, then goes on to NPCI, and from there it gets routed in terms of if it is to the bank where you held an account and the debit needs to happen, and finally in terms of through the PSP bank to the beneficiary bank where the credit needs to happen. So where I'm going with this, and sorry for walking you through so many players, is that this is a multi-party model. And in the multiple parties, there are third party application providers, there are payment service provider banks, there are issuer, and there are beneficiary banks. And it is possible that amongst those transaction legs, in one or two of those transaction legs, the payment doesn't go through. That is what happens behind the scenes. For a consumer, if a payment has not gone through, there are two, three experiences that the consumer could have. One is that the debit itself, it comes through as debit not being done, in which case you can actually pay through cash. The challenge comes through in the second or third cases. Second is where the debit has happened, However, you're figuring out that it has not reached the end merchant. So where is it? It could happen that this has got stuck either at the issuer end, which is the individual consumer who made the payment, or it could happen in the beneficiary end as well, which is the second or third cases. And there are several tools that NPCI has built, the ecosystem has built, to help in resolution, including contact centers, including how could you get your refunds. But I think where we're all looking to go to as a model is to say that we have as minimal, if any, sort of such transaction declines, and build what is called a lot of resiliency and very high success rates on payments.
Sure, noted your points, Diksha. So now let me ask, or maybe take your view specifically on the fintech ecosystem of India. Obviously, the number of fintechs are really large in India compared to many other countries, except maybe China or something. The ratio specifically of between the partnerships between the banks and fintechs was also very high. Most of the fintechs are raising funds left, right, and center. From India, many of them have already become unicorns. How do you view the current Indian fintechs, startups, or the whole fintech world of India? How do you see it shaping up?
So, if you see in terms of the startup ecosystem of the country, and within that, the fintech ecosystem, it's a very vibrant space. We have organizations in the space of payments, in the space of lending, in the space of wealth management. And when we look at the enabling blocks and what is happening on lasting changes in consumer behavior, we rarely speak in absolutes, but it would most people would think it's fair to assume that digitization is a trend that is here to stay. It started with the public population scale infrastructure that India had started to build up. And then the COVID pandemic just accelerated user adoption by a very large, margin. So when we look in terms of, the building blocks, whether if you think of UPI, we think of earlier the India stack, which now is, all of us accepted that it's part of our lives. Oaken, we look at what's happening on account aggregator. There seem to be a lot of opportunities that are likely to come up for fintechs, and like I was talking about earlier for the payment space as well. This holds true for fintechs as well. That not only as product companies, we often think that how do we innovate on products, but for the next level of growth for fintechs in the country, as we start to see scale emerge, is how would we go deeper in terms of serving existing users, in terms of building infrastructure for high resiliency, security, safety, and how do we go deeper and deeper in our penetration of existing products as well.
So, if you also want to add, considering we do not have many examples or the benchmarks where we can match our fintechs, how they can compete with the fintechs from Europe or USA, because the kind of innovation which the fintechs have created here is remarkable. But if you could give us your perspective in terms of what's next hereafter for the fintechs, because what has happened is obviously the segment is still not very mature, but it has reached to a level where it has gained a lot of attraction from the foreign and the domestic investors as well, also received some attention from the regulators as well, and now regulators is also looking at framing some rules over here. So considering all this, and we can see some rallies specifically towards the fund size where the investors are going little slow with the new age fintech companies. So what is for the Indian fintechs hereafter? That is one part of the question. And if you could add more to it in terms of what is required for Indian fintechs to achieve the next scale or the next level.
So, I think on the first part, and I must share this experience with you. So, my parents retired a few decades ago, and they were visiting me. They're based out of another city, and it was income tax return filing time, and they actually were filing their income tax returns away from their base city online. To me, it was, a signal of the lasting change that is happening on consumer behavior. And technology is such an integral part of our lives today. I think some bit of what we see on macroeconomic indicators, and it could be function of what's happening on global liquidity. It could be a function of monetary policy tightening happening in various economies. And those are cycles, economic cycles which come from time to time. But when you look at, what's happening in the India macrocosm, in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of our demographic, in terms of the population scale infrastructure I was talking about, a lot of this is here to stay. And therefore, for fintechs to have that ability to innovate and in terms of building out new models. I think in terms of what you said on, what's after, I'll go back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, which is that while we've had a remarkable journey so far, but estimates put at about 200 million Indians using digital payments, and you could think of associated financial services with that as well. So there is actually a very long runway where innovation is possible. For fintechs, for us to cater to our, the entire consumer base. And equally, as we look at that sort of scale, to think of how do we want to go deeper on penetration and create large scale architectures and resiliency as you aim to do that.
Okay. Again, meaningful thoughts, Diksha. Now, let me ask you one more very important question, and I will maybe give you two, 3 points which you can, give an answer in that format, maybe, or feel free to answer. So, simple question is, what is the future of Google Pay, and or how do you see the future of Google Pay going ahead? And my subsequent question to that, or maybe if you could add few lines to it in terms of, by going ahead, how will you reduce your customer acquisition fees if you think that it's huge right now? That is one part of it. Second, are you going to settle down only on QR scan code payments, or explore more with maybe iris payments, biometric payments, or voice payments, something like that? That is second part of the question. And third, is specifically, will you stay only in payments, or will you also add what you can say, the cross selling, which the financial institutions word this use this word quite frequently? Will you also do that and add maybe credit products, insurance products, or wealth products to Google Pay? So the broad question is about the future, but if you could highlight these three facts, would be really great, Diksha.
Yeah. So, when we think of the last 5 years, in many ways, it was like a sprint. And when we think of the future, to us, it's a long marathon. And some of our priority areas that we will, be looking to focus on is number one, how do we work in terms of bringing digital payments in a secure, in a safe, and in a very helpful way to consumers and merchants beyond the top cities and towns that are internet conversant. And that partly answers your other question, Amol, that what form factors could this take on innovation? It could be, would voice be part of it, for example, or would any other form factor help? So that's our first focus area. The second is that we've been serving medium and small merchants. Our QR codes are often seen there, but we feel that again there is a very long journey in one expanding that to seeing how many more merchants can we serve across the breadth of the country. Second, also in terms of enabling those merchants that we already do serve on the payment side to have maybe some more digital presence if that is a source of growth for them through simple gateways and tools. So that would be another focus area for us. The third one, and I think this is overarching in many ways, is how do we build safety, security, and reliability on our payment systems and experiences at scale. And I think added to that, when you look in terms of how do we look at the entire ecosystem, for us, from day one, and this is going to be a continued focus, and then a big one for us is a partnership model on how do we partner with financial services and banks in terms of providing services to consumers and merchants. So that partnership model is a big part of our future focus area as well. And then the last one would be in terms of, as you would know, for running any marathon, how does, one has sustainability? So that would also be a focus area. And I guess what I'd lastly like to leave you with in terms of the way we think about the future is that for us, being privacy first, being secure and offering safe experiences to our consumers is something which is paramount.
Okay, sure. I think there was detail one, Diksha, but if you could, give me a specific answer and allow me to ask you again on that part is, will you add more products to your payment vertical right now going ahead when you say about specifically about the partnerships, or will you stick to only payment domain?
So, we do have credit card with Axis. We do have partnership with certain financial institutions, with fintechs through our Spots platform. So, in terms of having different payment product or financial services products, as a ecosystem and participant and as a platform, we will look to bring together consumers, merchants, banks, and financial services providers. But the tenets that I spoke about are paramount for us.
Okay, noted your points, Diksha. I think that was really meaningful and detailed one. Thanks for sharing that perspective here. So let me stop here. And ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap here on this episode of Fintech Diary. Tap to review our previous episodes as well. If you like it, please don't forget to share it on social media. Also, please ensure you're subscribed to our daily newsletter, which is absolutely for free. Thanks for watching Fintech Diary and ETBFSI.com. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Diksha, for the meaningful conversation.
Thank you for having me.